feel rushed.
Okay, good.
Excellent. And it looks like we're live on YouTube and on Facebook. So now I'm going to do my magic and get this out in a couple of other places. Ah. Oh, that's probably why. Oh, interesting. It won't let me, for whatever reason, share it where I usually do. So anyways, for those of you that are hopping on here with us, can you let me know if you can see me and hear me fine, since my things is acting a little bit funky? Give us that comment and thumbs up so I know who's with us watching and tuning in. You'd think after doing this a few times, I'd be a lot quicker.
It's always something with these.
It really is. Today, it's like this option's not showing up for me that I'm used to. Oh, great. Awesome. Thank you so
Good
much,
morning.
guys. I can see you guys hopping on. I see Counselor Seymour's on here. Quest, thank you for hopping on as well. Yeah, it looks like everybody can see us and hear us. So we're just going to go ahead and get started and kicked off. As you all are aware, for those of you that are coming back, I'm your host, Juliet Bell, President and CEO of the Westminster Chamber of Commerce. And I'm excited to come back to you with Brian Poole. Brian is with GPS, the Government Performance Solutions, located here in Denver, Colorado, but servicing really statewide a lot of clients, mainly in the public sector, but some as well in the private and even nonprofit partners. So Brian was with us way early on. When we started these video series, we'd actually kicked off with how do you adapt business to what's going on? Here's the resources to conduct online virtual meetings and other fun software that you can use with your employees and your clients. And so he helped lead one of those discussions. You can actually find that video and anything else that we posted from March until now in our video section of the Facebook page. You can also find it on our YouTube page, Westminster Chamber of Commerce, where there's a channel that I hope you click the subscribe button on and connect with us on other social media platforms. So on Instagram, on Twitter, at Westy Chamber. And of course, be sure that you're checking our website consistently as we update information on our resource hub, events page, and things of that nature. That's westminsterchamber.biz. Now, I've been displaying this wonderful good morning message from Counselor Seymour, and I did that intentionally because I want you to become familiar with the comment section of this video. So during the broadcast, when we are visiting with you and when Brian starts leading the discussion, over. If you think of something that was beneficial, type that in. If you have a question very specific that you want us to touch on, also type that in and let us know. We will take those up at the end of the broadcast, giving ample time for our speaker to share the information that he would like to with you, but also giving us a chance not to go in a different direction and actually give you the content that we want you to hear. So be sure that you engage with us by liking, by commenting, because we like to see who's on here with us, give you that shout out that you deserve. I see Brian Dice, our board chair as well, is on here. Thank you for hopping on and tuning in. So with that, I will turn this over. I've briefly introduced Brian. Brian, like I said, I met Brian, I want to say, gosh, was it 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
So time flies by. It should be, it's probably about 12 years because we're going to count 2020 as 10 already. So for about 2 or 12 years, however you want to look at it. But I actually had the pleasure of meeting him over at a strategic plan effort that was taking place with our entire library system on the Jeffco side. And he works specifically with a lot of stakeholder engagement and outreach groups. And I just, when he starts talking and you learn from what he shares, you'll know why I was like, this is a gem that I have to hold on to for as long as I can. So I can't sing enough praises about him, but I'll have the presentation and the content he shares really show you what that is. Again, good morning to you, Brian. Anyone else that hops on, I'll give you those shout outs later on. I am muting myself and it is yours to take over.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Juliet. Really glad to be here, everybody. I am Brian Poole. I'm a partner with Government Performance Solutions. We're a local Denver consulting company, and we specialize in improving performance, and we do a lot of strategy work, stakeholder outreach, and those types of projects. And Juliet has asked me to join today to share some ideas around supporting equity, diversity, and inclusion in or even across a virtual workplace. All of us are getting used to working in our kitchens. You can see my baker's rack behind me, spend 5, 6, 7 hours a day on some of these Zoom calls or other similar technologies. And we've been doing some research over the last few months and learning how some of the tools that are available now can actually be leveraged even more in a more focused way to help improve equity, diversity, and inclusion in your workplaces. There's a lot of challenges, obviously, right now with what we're seeing across the state and the country, and a lot of concern that we try to include and address some of the more broader and important societal challenges. And it turns out that technology, as we're all learning, can adapt and be used and useful for this purpose. So I'll walk us through a couple of slides here, and then I'll share 4 or 5 different technologies that we've seen that can be useful for you. I've got some links at the tail end of this deck, and you can use those to access these kinds of things when on your own time in your own place. So feel free to use those when you're ready. But as I've said, the challenge that we're focused on here today is really some of the EDI, and that's just sort of the shorthand for equity, diversity, inclusion. Some of the strategies that organizations have been pursuing really over the last 20 years to try to expand and improve access and availability of information and engagement with our teams have been impacted by the stay-at-home orders and these remote and flex working environments. So what's interesting is that some organizations are already positively adapting to the new normal here, and I think they have some insight, both from a technological perspective and from a kind of a culture perspective, that you may find are useful in your settings. So give me a few minutes here, and I'll warm you up on these. We've got a quick vision from me in terms of how this could work, or the way to think about it is the idea of really having intuitive technology supported by engagement of your team can actually facilitate the alignment of your EDI strategies and your capabilities, and just better serving customers, employees, and all those, even during the pandemic. So what we find is that many of our goals they're similar even in the pandemic, but it just becomes more challenging because of this distance that we all have and need to maintain, at least for a little while longer. So first up would be the idea of improving morale, making sure that folks are connected, improving team cohesion, regardless of anyone's background, experience, perspectives, and so on, and trying to find ways to create that additional diversity so you can be more relevant and more impactful in your business and your strategies. While we're improving those and increasing those, we want to think about how do we reduce the time and effort that's required to do these kinds of things, and we make it just a little easier to get involved, a little easier to be engaged, a little easier to for folks to share their opinions and their varying inputs that we need to hear, as well as a very practical benefit here of essentially trying to reduce our customer churn and our employee turnover by being more relevant and helpful to them as we move through the process. So be thinking about these competing and often challenging goals of spending more time with people while trying to reduce the cost of that, engaging people more directly while reducing the amount of time to do such. It's a challenge, but I think you'll learn a little bit today, at least, that technology and what's available today can be used to bridge this gap and make the connection there. So I'll keep moving through the slides here, and we'll make some progress. The first thing to think about is, basically this mix of digital technologies can enable a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive workplace. This sudden shift that we're all going through presents a challenge of sustaining that fair work environment, but it's also an opportunity where everyone can reflect on their contributions, both negatively and positively, in sort of how we work, and make that as an opportunity to improve. And apart from what is really the obvious moral case, I would argue, for promoting diversity and inclusion, there are some, as Forbes research would show you here, improving job performance, increasing revenue, reducing turnover, and even mitigating some legal risks can all be possible if we're using the right technology in the right way. And we'll walk through a couple of scenarios here in a couple of minutes. Some additional arguments of really why collaborative technology can support this. Essentially, with the use of the process that some of the technologies have and embedded, we can create a more consistent and even less biased and scalable decision-making process. So by leveraging a little bit of the structure that you can find in some of the software that's available now, I think you're going to find that even some small nudges and some outreach efforts and some to some degree, some artificial intelligence, at least helping us to try to mine some of these things, is all relevant and can be used. All right, so one of the things that we've learned right now with this working from home, just a recent survey, basically half of the folks who are consistently working from home have felt burnout. Zoom fatigue, or whatever the term you might hear, is really relevant, and it does bring home, I think, this need for humans to be connected, this challenge when that doesn't and can't happen, and it really raises up some psychological and to some degree just some personal issues around how do I manage my work while I've got my family in the same house, and all of those practical elements. So we're thinking about, how do we use some of these, and this, as I've said, people are already making some big advances on this. We've seen Zoom meetings, for example. I've seen a lot more improvement in the etiquette there and how that's working. People are getting much more comfortable with those sort of remote and video calls. We're seeing a little more engagement in terms of how people are working through and making decisions around those. And at the same time, we're balancing a lot of the guidelines that either are coming or should be put in place in many organizations that can ensure that all your prospects and employees, from whatever underrepresented backgrounds they may have, that they are all benefiting from the engagement and from your work. Having said that, raising awareness of the bias as it occurs, especially with the real-time technology that we're sharing, becomes more important. When hundreds of thousands of people are watching, we need to make sure that we're using the right tools and have the right message that can be relevant for everyone listening. And that's something that I think we can work on in an offline environment as well, but using the collaborative technology that we'll talk through here in a second really can make that much more certainly standardized, streamlined, easy for people to engage and share those in a positive environment. So what's some of the research saying right now? We've got some links here at the back of the deck that you can feel free to mine through, but I think there are probably 4 major areas based on the research that where EDI technology can make an impact. And if you think of sort of a life cycle of a business or a life cycle of working with individuals in an organization, the first thing you can focus on is your talent acquisition. Trying to find and source candidates, select those candidates, and move them through essentially the onboarding process. This is a big area for our technologies. You'll find first of all, having your even your job postings and other things in front of the right people, in front of all of the potential candidates, can be a challenge sometimes. And there are partners that are thinking about this. But then as you start even to collect a little bit of data about people, even an email or something like that, or an interest, then the real journey starts. And that is finding out how to engage with them, find the right information to present to them, so that they can move themselves through that pipeline and get closer to a hire. And once they're hired, I think you can think about a second area kind of kicks into place, and that's really this idea of development, advancement, learning and development. All the areas around performance management and so on. This area, I'm trying to really train and impart information and your culture with your new hires or your seasoned hires. Presents a challenge in the remote environment. I think one of the things I've noticed is it's very difficult for some, especially if you're maybe a more senior person right now, to try to train a more junior person remotely. There's just a certain amount of engagement and one-on-one eye contact and body language and those types of more subtle communication tools that humans do have when we're in the room together that tend to fade or at least be a little less effective over when you're a little box on the screen. So some of the technologies that are coming along now are really working on this remote performance management, leadership development, and so on. And I'll give you an example of one here in a little bit that I think is worth some time to study.
Well, if I can interject real quick, I think, you touched on a really great point when you started talking about the HR component and placing what open positions you have in the right places to attract those different candidates, because what we're seeing is those businesses that are able to quickly adapt and quickly digitally transform literally their culture and the way that they're outreaching to the community and bringing on diversity in their human capital. That's what helps them address the consumer side of things and really be on the forefront of what the needs are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great point. So we're moving through the life cycle, if you will. Let's say now folks are developed, or we've at least got some training, and we've shared different. And I'll share a couple different ways that can be done. And you're starting to develop folks, but you're doing it remotely using technology. For the most part here. Now, if we think about it from a engagement and retention, now we've got somebody, we've invested in them, we've given them a lot of the material, the knowledge that they'll need, the skills that they'll need to succeed. The next challenge is really keeping them here, keeping them happy, keeping them engaged with a high level of morale, and feeling connected to their peers. One of the challenges I see with my clients right now is many of them are struggling with, the biggest part or the most rewarding part of a lot of people's careers has been creating those friendships, creating those connections with their coworkers, and that's much more difficult when you're a little box on the screen. We know, and so there are ways, I think, from a technology perspective, to create a proxy for some of those things. We can't replace it entirely. No one would articulate that, I think, but finding ways to mitigate the challenges that are presented by the remote environment and putting as much of your culture and your connection online as you can. So this really translates, especially for some of the younger generations. They really want to see that communication and that voice and be part of the culture, learn the culture, and become part of a team. And that is challenging when you're, when you're sitting in your kitchen. So we're going to talk a little bit about a solution there that can help. And then finally, I don't have a tool for this last one to share today, but the idea of analytics is the more that we can take the technology and really digitize the process, whether that's on the sourcing side or development or retention and so on, as you move through the employment life cycle. Now we have enough information in apples to apples format that we can start to do that analysis, whether that's a dashboard looking at pay equity, or maybe looking at a business case for investment in EDI and those types of things. And all the other elements of the society. So as we know from working with different software, if it's properly implemented and you're collecting the data in the right way, and you're not onerous in terms of how people might interact with what you're doing, you're going to find that data ultimately is useful on, if you will, the back end to help make decisions about investments, to make decisions about, are we making progress across equity, diversity, and inclusion? What are some of those metrics look like, and so on. So this is I'll talk briefly about it, but I don't have a sample software to share. But there are a number out there, and I can encourage you to think that if you start to collect the data in the life cycle, most of the software packages that you'll see do have an analytics component. Although there's some that you see from a much larger HR perspective, say a Workday or others, that may have application point interfaces or other ways to connect and integrate the data from multiple disparate sources. So lots to think about there. All right, so these are the 4 areas. Let's dive into a couple examples here for each of these. One that's really interesting, this is sort of on the sourcing and recruiting side at the beginning of the life cycle, is a application called Textio. And this is really interesting. Basically what they do is they'll help as you think about communication, especially written communication to your potential prospects. Think about sourcing emails or job posts and things like that. You can run this through the software. It's essentially a text reader, and it will highlight various. You can see an example down below with the different colored highlight words. They'll highlight those as either potentially exclusionary or biased or potentially troublesome, and can also prompt more inclusive language that statistically has proven to just be more relevant and attractive to the best candidates, the folks you're trying to bring into your fold, and even improve the response rates if we can customize that. And an example of that was Zillow used Textio in a case study, and they saw that a 12% increase in women applicants resulted after deploying this and really thinking about the gender sort of language and other challenges that had existed in some of their published materials. So they were able to catch some of these things that may be a turnoff, or at least just not hitting right on the nail on the head in terms of the outreach and the engagement level for women. So think about Textio, think about the purpose and the process here, essentially of making sure that the language you publish has the greatest statistical likelihood of being relevant and hitting the nail on the head, being for those that you'd like to recruit and engage.
If I can just comment real quick in between here, and you kind of alluded to this, Brian, was and I love the example you gave us with Zillow and how they use that for to address the stat that they obviously had seen lacking in their organization. And I stopped you because I wanted to emphasize that out to people that are watching this, is first you have to look at what do I have? What are my resources in my organization? And then you set up your measurable goals, whether that's trying to attract specific candidates that have this expertise or this skill set or this type of background. And then that's how you select, or you really gauge some of these different platforms and can really look at, after you implement them, did it actually meet any of those goals? Were you able to achieve what you were hoping for? And in the long run, has your organization moved forward because of it? So I just wanted to interject that, because you have to start at the ground level first before delving into finding, which platforms out there and what works, because otherwise you're using it and you're going out there, but there's no measurement that's there. There's no determinant for a goal that you're trying to reach, and you're not necessarily creating a diverse and inclusive workplace when you're not thinking of all elements that could benefit your company.
Yeah, great comment. Great comment. That's right. And we think about I've got a couple risks actually here towards the end of this presentation that you're really dipping into there, and we want to use the right tool at the right moment, but there's a lot of preparation and thought before we run out and grab a software. So great warning for everyone. All right. Another example, virtual reality, right? This is a technology that's coming into its own. It's a little clunky sometimes, and I think there's challenges obviously with some of the hardware and whatnot. But let's dive in, because when you're talking about training and trying to create different scenarios for new employees, especially, but also all the rest of us, what is one way that you can put people into an environment and have them interact and react to what they're seeing? We've all seen some videos and things, but virtual reality is really that next level of that. And being VR software is very interesting here. Basically, you can customize a scenario or multiple scenarios for any of your clients or any organization, and try to prompt them with scenarios or issues, concerns that may arise, and you're trying to give them a chance to both recognize, right, some of that on their own, and then immediately interact with that with technology, and highlight when they see something maybe is starting to go sideways, or they're seeing some language that's emerging that's going to make people uncomfortable, and so on. And so this is an area where the user can learn to really call out comments later when they're in the real world, but they can get that muscle memory going in a safe environment and start to ask the harder questions, maybe based on the prompts that you put into the training scenarios. So here's an example with Bank West. They customize a training experience in virtual reality for their team and their colleagues, mostly for their leadership, to learn from the different experiences. And on the survey, it was interesting. 100% of them found it as engaging and memorable. And for an EDI type of exercise, sometimes it's seen as dry or irrelevant to people for whatever reason. And I think being willing to try new technologies and experiment with how to engage them and make a memory of that training is going to make a more lasting impact. And so here's one that you might want to consider, and feel free to research online. I've got another one here called Balloon. As you move through that, we've talked about the recruiting and sourcing side, and then the training here, training on the virtual reality side. Well, Balloon is pretty good once you've got people involved. And you're trying, and they're actually involved with you, and you're trying to understand a little more of the feedback from all of the employees that you might want to, but trying to limit the amount of bias that's going to influence that. And so what Balloon does really well is essentially try to collect unfiltered and this is the key word, anonymous feedback to gain so folks have a little more confidence to share their thoughts and provide their ideas that maybe they were going to be reticent about. And an example here was with Dartmouth College. Balloon was used to facilitate discussion and evaluation of candidates who were going to join an alumni ambassador group. And the idea was that previous to using this software, a lot of the folks who sort of made it through and became selected did so essentially because they knew someone, right? They had a personal connection to the team that was selecting it. And it was only through really anonymizing who was applying. So you're suppressing the name and other information about that, and then allowing individuals to comment essentially on the merits of those folks in a safe technology environment. Then they could also at the same time collect a live record of those discussion points and reduce the meeting time. So here's an area where you can create a little more unbiased data. You can create a record of that and potentially reduce the meeting time by using the cloud-based technology while everyone's working from home. So think about Balloon if you want to get some more engagement level and using software to capture it, essentially putting some structure in it and then collecting that data in the background.
If I can again interrupt you, just because we've got a lot of people that hopped on here pretty fast. So Councillor Bowles, I see here with us. Good morning to you. I also see Jason Gank. We've got Richard Chamberlain from the Diversity and Inclusion Board, and I know I've seen him heavily involved in our city and their boards and commissions as well. I see Melanie and several folks with us today. Is Brian Poole from Government Performance Solutions, GPS for short, sharing DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, ways that you can implement it in the digital workplace. He's touched on kind of the challenge, the reason behind why we would need it, the business case really behind that, and now touches on a few different technology sources that are available. The Balloon, I would be interested in seeing, if the college that you shared earlier on also tried a different technology, and if they assess the feedback from their employees on that, because I would imagine that an anonymous type of a platform would allow people to be more comfortable with sharing feedback that they have inside that workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the sort of threads that runs through a lot of these technologies is allowing people to provide their feedback, but not necessarily attributing it to themselves. This gets the discussion point started, and it's been raised, but people aren't worried about a retribution or being called out for raising that issue. So we really try to find safe places through through anonymity, and really multiple ways to provide that. So that they're comfortable sharing their ideas. The last thing we want is the creative good idea to be stifled and kept in, sort of in their pocket, because they're afraid that somebody might not agree or something to that effect. So we're trying to really open the spigot of ideas with the safe space in a lot of these. All right, another one here. One of my favorites is NodeApp. This is a very simple interface based. Oh, I just saw a spelling error there. Sorry about that. With virtual sticky notes, basically everyone's been in the room where you've got the sticky notes going up on the wall. And the advantage of these, of course, is we can have people working in parallel, writing ideas at the same time. A facilitator, myself, often will prompt a group, "Hey, what's one of the challenges you're seeing here today?" Or something to that effect, and then they'll all at the same time write out their sticky notes, and then we collect them and put them up on the wall, and we start the dialogue. Well, when we went to COVID and started to figure out, and we're still trying to do the same kind of work, still trying to collaborate and work together and share our ideas, it got a little harder because in some of these technologies, everyone knows sort of who you are, right? You're on the screen, you're in the chat box or the chat room, and it's difficult sometimes to prompt and get the efficiency of parallel creation of these sticky notes, but not in a digital world. So NodeApp kind of meets that right in the meets that need right away. It's you have a cloud-based board basically where everyone in real time can drop. Just by clicking on the board, can drop a new sticky note like you see down below in the pictures. They can change their colors, the font, and so on, the size of the stickies very easily. And then if you're paying attention on it, it'll just say user is creating a sticky, not Brian Poole is creating that or something. This presents and preserves the anonymity of the idea, but again, gets it right out in front of everyone, and to the point where they're very comfortable sharing even maybe a controversial idea or a controversial solution. You can get that out in the open, and other folks can read it in real time. And one way to manage this is sort of using the multiple threads. So where you're asking people if they want to be anonymous, work with the stickies. If they want to be attributed, they can use the chat board or the chat room, and then or they can also in a live video call, right? They can either have their camera on or they can have their audio. But the idea here is again multiple ways for people to contribute their ideas, and if they're ready, they can attribute that to themselves. But if they're not, and they want to see that idea, really addressed by the team, then they can use that in anonymity, and it works really well. All right, so we've gone through all these, but having said that, and Juliet was right to highlight this, there are some risks, right? Anytime you're employing a technology to solve a problem, and I've been doing this for 20 years, there's just any number of challenges that you want to at least think on the front end before you go out and buy some technology. The first one is that the technology itself may have some bias. We've seen a number of cases where the algorithms or other things have been written by folks who just don't understand the different diversity of folks that are out there. So you may already be creating more bias if you're not thoughtful about that in terms of how it's been run. There are sometimes if you identify risks and so on, but you fail to act against those, now you may create additional risks. So we want to make sure that if you're saying you're going to collaborate and you're going to work on things, that you follow through. Don't do this halfway. That's not going to help. Third one here, the perception that technology can just solve the bias problems is probably dangerous, right? It's the people that are using the technology that need to actually solve for these things. But the technology can help. It can provide that structure and some of the prompts for folks to interact maybe in a safer way, or improve the language that we're using, or the training that we're giving, and so on. And then there's sometimes when we use too much technology, we find people get they worry that the technology is going to make the decision, not people. And I think we just have to highlight that, again, people are the point. The technology is just a tool to get there. So a couple other quickly that we want to talk about is the more technology that we create that is separate from the other technology that we're using can create disparate databases where we can't integrate that. I mentioned that earlier on the dashboards. So thinking about how to, yes, collect the information, but we often want to stitch that together with other people or processes to make sure you have a more holistic way to integrate it and use it. And then finally, last one, just need to be careful when we start talking about language or policing language, that kind of thing. There is a time where some people start to feel like they're being constrained in their creativity and they can't use their own voice sometimes. So we want to know, we're trying to create an area where everyone feels welcome and nobody feels put upon or in an adverse way. But at the same time, we don't want to have everyone having to follow the exact same words or a script, if you will, because then you lose some of that internal individualism and that creativity, which we don't want to. That's obviously the opposite of what we're trying to do. All right. So when you've done if you take a look at the PowerPoint later, which you'll have available, there's a bunch of links here. And at the end, this is just some contact points for myself and others in our firm. We'd be glad to answer any questions you have and talk through how to use these tools in your business if you're interested. So feel free to reach out if you see the need. Thanks, everyone. I'd love to get some questions if you have.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Brian. I will be including the link to Brian's presentation into the comment section after this broadcast, and also his contact information as well, so you can follow up with him directly, especially as you're laying the foundation for looking into adding in these types of technologies and which one might work, and structurally what your goals are for your business. That's really where he can make sure that you're set up to succeed. We've had a lot of people that came on, several different comments along the way. Richard has shared with us, thanks for highlighting the caveats, crucial considerations as part of ongoing processes. And yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily think about that there might be some biases very early on as it's getting developed. And I think naturally we all come in with an idea that could be perceived as such, right? And I thought it was important and very crucial and something that was beneficial for you to share, Brian, which was the anonymousness behind this and allowing for people to share their ideas and their creativity and express helps, because when we are trying to correct people in the word usage or what they're saying or how they're saying, they do feel a sense that it's stifling them, and it's also putting one against another, right? So you're helping one group, but at the same time, now this group is oppressed as a result of it. And so it's interesting to see that this digital might be the answer to that with the anonymous function, again, allowing for people to creatively express and others to engage with them. So it's instead a peer-led discussion as opposed to an order of here's the way that you go about it. So we did have a question that came very early on that kicked it all off for the queue. So I just wanted to pull it up. I will pull this up. I'll share the question with you. And then because it is lengthy, I will pull it off. We want to see your face as you're answering this question for us. So Marcus is completely agreeing with you with the mentoring. There's startups like Numbly that are trying to increase diversity in mentoring from HR. How can the data be used to help with mentoring diverse candidates?
Right. So yeah, first understanding, right, who's involved in that conversation. What are some of their backgrounds, experiences, interests, and perspectives. We have to understand that from the sort of the source, and then certainly when you're talking with anybody you're mentoring, you've got to think about what are their interests, what's their background, how are they working through that, and so data can help map that. We talked about the dashboard before, but I think there's ways to sort of map who's involved with who, what are some of those interchanges like. I've seen scoring or feedback loops in a lot of the software that's saying, hey, I got some good feedback from this person, or I was a little uncomfortable with what I got from my mentor on this one. And again, once you've got that data in an apples to apples format, we can start to use that to make decisions. So I think trying to string together the interactions, number one, who's involved, when are they occurring, all of that can be logged electronically behind the scenes in the database of the software, but then really not manipulating it, but mining that and looking for some of those trends to identify what's important and what's not, will maybe allow you to trace that back to some very positive interactions. And there's things to learn with people, and we all need to grow and learn new language. So here's a chance to kind of trace that back, and maybe you have three negative interactions or something, and that person maybe there's a little additional training or insights that they need from their mentor. So you can kind of chain this up together with that data.
Excellent. Well, Marquez, let me know if that answers your question. I think it does, but I'll be curious to hear your feedback. We have a comment from our YouTube viewer, and she does apologize for sharing. Sorry for the caps in a secondary comment. So her finger slipped. She's not yelling at us. She's asking about the exact name for Balloon. Where can they check it out? So Mary, we are going to be including the presentation, which has all the link click-throughs. Brian, did you have specific you wanted to throw it out there?
I can't remember the exact URL. I'd have to check, but it's in the hyperlink. I believe it. I don't think it's balloon.com. I think there's.
No, I think it's getballoon.com.
Yeah, that sounds right. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So thank you, Mary, for tuning in on our YouTube page and engaging with us as well. Brian is sharing, this is some great technology being shared this morning. I could not have agreed more. We pitched the idea, kind of shared our thoughts together, and Brian made it happen. So is there anything else you want to leave us off with before I start closing out with some of the information about the next broadcast and ways people can engage with this platform, Brian?
Nothing specific. I just appreciate the time, people listening. I think this issue is important. It's timely. The technology can help, but it can't do it without people. Something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are the true reflection of the organization, the culture, and everything that they're trying to represent. So I definitely agree with you on that note. And so I also see Kuma Roberts with us on here. Kuma leads the Mosaic, which is actually in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they focus a lot on DE&I and initiatives that are to support businesses with implementing diversity. So thank you for hopping on here as well, Kuma. So we are almost to our 45-minute mark, and believe it or not, I actually extend this presentation intentionally because I knew we had some really great content. So we did not go over. We ended up being within that 45-minute window. So I thank you so much for being a part of it and kind of running with the punches with me as I kept it longer than usual. As you all are aware, I always like to close out with some information about what's next and what's up and coming. Tomorrow we'll be back here at 11 a.m. in our nonprofit corner. So we're featuring another one of our school district foundations, the Westminster Public Schools Foundation, to touch on how COVID affected them, what new things and opportunities that were created as a result of it, and then how we can engage and support them during this transitional time, especially since school is about to kick back off. And I know Brian and I were just talking about that. There are several Woodrow Wilson Charter. They'll be the first one to go full-time in person starting this Thursday. And then we've got Colorado Mines starting in about a week. So several different schools starting back up. That is another timely one. We're getting some love on our presentation, so I'll be filtering it up here in the comment section while I'm closing this out. So if you're interested in all things related to our school foundations and how you can learn more about supporting them and how they transition, come back with us at 11 o'clock. If you do end up watching this video on replay, give us that hashtag replay so we know that you did tune in, that you found it valuable, but also do your part as well in sharing this out. Tag people, as I know Marquez has done, I've done. Tag people that you know that are in this line of work, that might be interested in it, or even those that are not in the line of work, but they should be understanding how to implement this to the fullest advantage for their business and their organization. So be sure that you share the information out there, tag people. Shara, thank you for hopping on here with us as well. He's from outside of Colorado. Always love the people that tune in to this broadcast from all over the place. And then if you have a question that you didn't get a chance to ask us, be sure that you type it into the comment section or message it into us. We'll be sure to get that answered for you through Brian or put you in direct contact with him as well. Again, we'll share his presentation with you later after this broadcast. So bear with us as I get that live on our website and then the link made available to you all directly, and feel free to touch base with him. I thank you all for taking about 45 minutes out of your morning to spend it with us to get educated in short bursts. We do the live broadcasts to try and educate you on a variety of things, from businesses that are doing things right, to COVID updates, to things that you can be implementing to adapt as easily as possible. So it's supposed to be varied and serve a variety of audience. So I'm glad that you were joining us today. And of course, Brian, thank you for always rolling with me when I throw you a one sentence or two and you and we add life to it and make it happen.
I love it. I'll be back.
Yes, I would love to have you back and we'll make it happen. But I appreciate you so very much and have an awesome day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.